There might be some of you who are listening to this right now and you can kind of relate, but you're not sure if you're dealing with grief. And I think it's good when you can hear what they are, because maybe it'll help you identify with where you're at in this season, grow in your self-awareness so that the actual healing can take place as you move forward. So the first one is Hey everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Now What podcast. I am your host, Sierra Stout. I'm so glad you're here, and if you haven't already, I encourage you to pause this video, go check out episode 1, get a little bit of backstory behind the reason I started this podcast, see if it's something worth spending your time on, and then you can jump back in with us because today's topic, it's going to be a little heavy, but I believe it's necessary. I think a lot of people are dealing with this, but nobody's talking about it, and that is grief. Now, I know grief is often associated with death, but we're going to be viewing it through the lens of loss. So how many of you who are listening to this right now have lost your sport? It was something that was a part of your day-to-day for years. It became a part of who you were. You spent so much time with it, and then one day it just came to an end. I know that culture often likes to celebrate the transition season out of our sports whenever we finish with them in that time. And it's, go spread your wings. We're so excited for your next chapter. Look at everything that you did. Congratulations. But nobody talks about the grief that follows that transition season. I know for me, when my sport came to an end, I definitely struggled with grief for a couple months, and I didn't realize that's what was going on. I felt a little crazy. I was wondering why I felt isolated and sad and angry and bitter and numb and all of the things. And it wasn't until I had somebody who was in my close circle tell me, hey, you're just grieving and it's okay. And I feel like just hearing that gave me a sense of relief of there's nothing wrong with me. This is actually normal. And I often like to view this season of transition as a breakup. You know, if you've ever been in a relationship before and had a breakup, you can relate to this, but you've spent a lot of time getting to know this thing, such as your sport or this person, if we're looking at it through the terms of a breakup, but you spent your days with them. You woke up thinking about them. You went to bed thinking about them. It was the first thing on your mind. And, you know, when you pour yourself into something for so many years and then the breakup happens and it's all just cut off in what feels like an instant, it can be pretty jarring. And I know that culture respects a heartbreak of a breakup, but what about the heartbreak of breaking up with your sport? So if you're listening to this right now and you think, maybe I'm grieving, but I'm not sure. Well, keep listening because I'm about to unpack some of the common symptoms and signs that you're actually wrestling with grief. So some of the major signs and symptoms of grief are anger, bitterness, isolation, feeling more tired and unmotivated than usual. Maybe anything that reminds you of your sport sends you in this fight, flight, or freeze moment. Okay, can you relate to any of that? Because if so, you're probably wrestling through some form of grief. When your sport ends, it is a death to the version of who you were when you were playing that. We can't go back in time, so when it's over, it's over. Even if you play it recreationally, it's just different. And I know for me personally, that was really hard to come to terms with. And I wasn't able to go to the golf course to spend time playing something that used to bring me so much joy because it almost triggered me. And I don't know if you can relate to that, but that's normal. And I think the hardest part with all of this is everybody's celebrating that next season, but nobody's teaching us to mourn the version of who we were. Especially if your identity was caught up in it like mine was. Again, I would tell you till I was blue in the face that it wasn't, but when I was removed from my sport, I realized how much my identity was in it. And so not knowing how to mourn that version of myself was really hard. And I think there's a lot of tension in the in-between of I'm not who I was, but I'm not quite yet who I'm becoming. It's okay. You're not alone. And that's why we're talking about this today. All right. So we're going to talk about why grief is so confusing in this context, because again, it's often associated with death, but we're viewing it as the loss of something or someone, aka the version of yourself that you used to be. And there's no funeral. There's no moment where it's officially just over. Everything just becomes silent. People stop asking, people stop checking in, and they assume that you've moved on and you're thriving in this next season. And you might be, which is awesome. I can attest that I really am grateful for this current season that I'm in. But it doesn't mean that there's not moments, that there's not days where I'm still feeling the grief and the heaviness of what once was, who I once was as athlete Sierra. Because I still identify with that. It is just in a completely different context now. And that's hard. It's confusing. It's also weird when you feel like the world and people around you see you as retired or the former athlete, but maybe you just feel like you have unfinished business. Maybe you knew that it was your last tournament or your meet or match or game or whatever it was for you in your sport. And regardless if you knew it was your last or you didn't, it's still hard because that abruptness, that waking up the next morning and realizing it's all over, nobody prepares us for that. And I think that's the hardest part and why the grief that comes after it is often so confusing. I know that for me personally, I felt guilty about being sad or being angry. I often would tell myself it was just a sport. Get over it. Like it's a game. But then I realized it was also everything to me. It was my identity. It was the reason that I woke up in the morning. It felt like my purpose, which it was in that season. And so I can't just put a blanket statement around it of, oh, it was just a sport. No, it was everything. And so if you feel guilty about being sad or angry in this season, know that it is okay. I honestly hope that that shame and guilt gets broken off of you because it's not going to help your journey moving forward. So the next thing that I want to talk about is the signs and symptoms of grief, because there might be some of you who are listening to this right now and you can kind of relate, but you're not sure if you're dealing with grief. And I think it's good when you can hear what they are, because maybe it'll help you identify with where you're at in this season, grow in your self-awareness so that the actual healing can take place as you move forward. So the first one is emotional numbness. That's when you feel disconnected from yourself or others. Life feels gray or dull. Number 2, anger and resentment. That's when you're irritated more easily, you feel bitter about how things ended, or you're blaming others. Number 3, avoidance. You avoid watching the sport that you once played, visiting the gym, talking about it, because it just stings too much. There's a wound there that wasn't dealt with, and so you don't even want to address it. Number 4, restlessness or aimlessness. You're chasing the next thing, but nothing feels right. You feel like, man, this is the right direction to go, but I'm still so stuck in this past version of me and who I was and the things that I did, and you can't seem to just move forward. And 5, maybe you're having random moments of emotion. I'm personally not much of a crier, but I remember having moments of just absolute meltdowns, weeping, and not knowing where it came from. But I was grieving, and I didn't even know it. So maybe you're hit with sudden sadness or tears, and you don't know why. So if you can relate with any of those 5 symptoms, then odds are you're probably grieving. Maybe you experienced those symptoms in the past and you didn't realize, oh, that's what that was. And you need to revisit it. I know it's hard, but when you do the work now, it'll really set you up for success in the future to become the best version of yourself and fully enjoy the new season that you're walking in. Again, I know there's so many athletes out there that are feeling these things and wrestling with it. So you're not alone. There's no shame around it. You're not weak for feeling them. And one thing that honestly bothered me was thinking about, why does nobody prepare us for this? Why does nobody talk about it? We know that it'll come to an end, but because we can't fully process that and what it looks like, it is just left unspoken. But why are the systems that we're a part of not speaking about it? Why are we not having engagements or meetings like this where somebody or maybe a group of people who were athletes come back in and talk about these things with people who are about to walk into that transition. Maybe that's schools, teams, even families built around performance, etc. I think there's this unhealthy pattern of athletes being taught to push through the pain but not process it. Even during our playing time, I know that there's good things that go on and there's really hard things that go on. And I think that we have adapted this culture to say you're weak if you're feeling your feelings, so just don't feel them. Push through the pain and don't process it. But that's doing a lot more harm than good. And I really do believe that people would walk in more of their full potential and be a lot healthier mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually, etc. if they were just given room to process it. I also think that there's a lack of emotional education around things coming to an end. I remember from a young age, I always struggled with change a lot. I remember having my last day of 3rd grade and I was really excited for summer, but I remember crying to my mom because I was sad that 3rd grade was over. That specific teacher that I had was no longer my teacher. That specific class that I was in was no longer going to be together. Even though it's exciting to move on and move forward, change is hard and it's messy and there's a real grief that comes to that. So I do believe that if there was just some more emotional education around endings, then people would know how to process and how to grieve. Can you imagine if there was actual teachings on how to grieve better, and if there were actual places for people to grieve and process without feeling any shame tied to it? Think about how differently people would walk around if this was normalized in a different light. I know that retiring, or whatever word you want to put to it when your sport comes to an end, sounds clean and celebratory, but the emotional experience that follows it is often messy, silent, and really difficult. I hope that if you hear anything from this episode today, it's that you have permission to feel. If nobody's given you permission in your life to feel your feelings, well, congratulations. Today's the first day, because you deserve to grieve. You deserve to honor what once was, a version of yourself that you once were, and honor it. Honor it well. Think about when you have lost somebody or something important to you, how you honor them. Why aren't we doing that with our sport? Why aren't we doing that with ourselves when we're walking out of this exciting season into something that's new and honestly kind of intimidating? So if you hear anything from today's episode, I hope you're hearing that you have permission to feel and to grieve. You deserve to grieve. Right now, honestly, pause where you're at. I want you to say out loud, I am allowed to miss it. I am allowed to wish it ended differently. And I am allowed to still hurt, even though that I might be grateful for that season of my life. Sometimes just giving voice to it and naming, hey, I am grieving, allows those chains that are keeping you held bondage to be broken off so that you can move forward and actually step into true healing, which is found on the other side of processing hard things. And also another reminder is that grief does not mean that you're stuck. It means that you care. And if you are grieving, all it means is that that part of your life mattered to you deeply. So congratulations, because you did pour so much of yourself into this thing. And we all know how much work that took. We all know the sacrifices that it took. And it's exciting to honor and celebrate that. But a part of it is feeling your feels. So it's totally okay if you don't know who you are after your sport comes to an end, because that's a part of grief. And we're going to be talking about that identity crisis in an upcoming episode. So hang tight. I'm really excited to tackle that one, because I know that it's jarring and it's confusing when you have no idea who you are and you're trying to step into this new version of yourself and root your identity in other things outside of everything that you knew. But although we've heard all of these things and we've probably recognized by now, hey, I have some work to do, I want to help you out by giving you some practical steps that I've personally participated in. But I get frustrated when people talk about things and I'm like, yeah, I can relate. And then, okay, now what though? No pun intended. Now what? What do I do? So we're going to be talking about some ways that you can start healing post-grief. So 1, I know I mentioned this before, name it. I'm grieving. If you can, wherever you're at listening right now, say it out loud. I am grieving. There's nothing wrong with that. That alone can lift the shame off of your chest. Number 2, feel it. Don't try to fix it. Let yourself cry. Let yourself be angry. If you need to journal and write things down, I highly recommend that you do that. It's helped me process and honestly find emotions that I didn't know that I had buried deep within. If you need some other journal prompts, here are a couple that I've done. 1, what do I miss the most? 2, why do I feel lost? And 3, what did my sport give me that I'm scared I won't find somewhere else? Another actionable step for healing is talk it out. Again, I know we already mentioned this, but find somebody in your circle, whether that's a mentor, a counselor, a sports psychologist, an old coach, an old friend, etc. But giving yourself room to process things out loud is sometimes the best healing that we can do. And lastly, create a space for reflection. This might sound really weird, but have you ever considered writing a letter to your sport? Have you ever considered writing a letter to your former self, the athlete version of you that you feel like you can't have back because that season came to an end? If you feel comfortable with it, I encourage you to try that. See how it helps. And for any of you that are willing to do that, I would love to hear how that went for you. Whether you want to leave that in the comments here, or you can click down in the show description, click on the link to follow us on Instagram, and then send us a DM over there. I think it'd be really beautiful to just hear how that journey of creating space for reflection has allowed you to heal in a new way, or what emotions came up that you didn't know were buried beneath. Because I can tell you one thing, I had a lot of things come up that I didn't know were deeply rooted within me, and I felt like there was just a layer of freedom that I was able to step into once I created space for this. I hope that those actionable steps will be helpful for you, and I just wanted to remind you that grief is a gateway to something new purpose, new confidence, and new identity. I'm really hoping that this podcast for you, and even for myself, is the beginning of that next chapter. We're not going to pretend like our sport didn't happen. We're not going to pretend like the good things and the hard things didn't happen. Instead, we're going to learn to carry it differently. And it starts with unpacking and doing the healing. And we're not moving on from our athletic life. We're learning to integrate it into our next season. It just looks a little differently, and that's okay. So as we wrap up this episode, I want to leave you with some closing encouragements. 1, you're not broken, you're just grieving, and that's okay. There's no shame around it. 2, you're not alone. I know I kind of sound like a broken record when I say that, but I want that to be so integrated into your head as you listen to this podcast, because I know it can feel isolating, and we're surrounding ourselves with a community of people who actually understand what it feels like to go through what you're walking through. So if this episode has resonated with you whatsoever, I would love to hear from you. If you feel comfortable, leave a comment down below of something that you took from it and you feel like you gained from listening. Talk about the good and the hard things of grief and actionable steps that you're going to be taking to move forward. If there's something that you've done personally that wasn't in this podcast, put it down for other people to see. Maybe it'll help them in their journey. And as always, if you don't feel comfortable leaving a comment here, you can always follow us on Instagram and shoot us a DM. We love hearing from you guys. So if you haven't already, please, please, please like and share this episode. It will help it get out to more people like you and I who need to hear something like this and have a sense of hope, as this transition can often be tricky and isolating. So thank you so much. Be sure to subscribe and follow wherever you're listening. And until next time, I'll see you on the next episode of the Now What Podcast.